Okay, so there are several things I wanted to talk about today, and one of them was on my mind just now, and it's this issue that I think that we find it very difficult to feel curiosity towards ourselves in our culture. It's a sense I get. Sorry. Okay. Yes, we find it difficult to feel curiosity towards ourselves. I think that's what meditation fosters, for example. I think meditation fosters a sense of curiosity towards ourselves because it's this act of doing nothing implies that you're focusing on yourself. You're focusing on the present moment, but it becomes indistinguishable somehow from yourself, right? Because you're doing nothing, so you're applying your focus to no other aim that is outside of yourself or that is an object to yourself. Any aim that you could apply your focus to would be an object to yourself as a subject. So when you don't do anything, right? Goalless practice, right? When you do that, the aim is not applied to an object but to the subject. And those are the moments when suddenly your focus falls flatly on yourself. And when your focus falls on yourself, I feel that curiosity just comes naturally. I wonder if maybe curiosity is not something that you need exactly to you don't exactly need to make an effort to feel it, although I think that doesn't hurt. But I think that curiosity sometimes just comes from pure focusing on something that you hadn't focused before. Anyway, so I guess my question today is, why do I get the sense, why do we find it so hard to focus on ourselves or feel curiosity towards ourselves, right? In other words, like, why is meditation so hard? Why is it something that is so hard to do nothing that entire religions are built around it, right? Like Brad Warner argues that most religions, or especially, obviously he's focusing on Zen Buddhism, but a lot of religions have a practice at the center of them that is a sort of a non-doing practice, be it prayer or be it meditation or other things, right? And that it is so counterintuitive to do nothing that an entire symbolic system needs to be built around it just to remind yourself that it's a good idea. So definitely it's difficult. So I think, like, why is it difficult? It seems to be difficult because we're systematically being told to not focus on ourselves. And this just makes it very difficult then to feel curiosity towards yourself, because you're systematically told not to. There is a deep habit in you to not focus on yourself. It's funny also because obviously this habit has an absolute shadow side to it, because the result of not focusing on yourself is, ironically, being extremely egocentric, being extremely greedy, you could say. And it's precisely because we don't focus on ourselves that we end up indulging in every pleasure that we can. Because pleasures are a way of distracting yourself from what you're feeling. If you're feeling a bunch of things that you don't want to feel and you just indulge in a pleasure, then you sort of, it's easy to just erase that for a second. So ironically, not focusing on yourself makes you really self-centered, I think. And I also sense that not focusing on yourself is the main cause of anxiety. That somehow it's anxiety that would be cured by focusing on yourself. Because anxiety tends to be this enormous sort of fear and preoccupation with things that are not yourself. What if this thing over there comes and attacks me? What if this other thing over there comes and attacks me? And after all, anxiety is a ghost, right? We're not talking about real concerns when we're talking about anxiety. We're talking about absolute ghosts, things that really are not happening to you. So by focusing on them, you're not focusing on yourself. I think that it's by focusing on yourself that you stop focusing on them, on the weird sort of ghosts. And you could even say that the focusing on the ghosts is like the negative way of avoiding focusing on yourself. If you focus on weird potential threats, that also prevents you from focusing on yourself, and therefore you achieve this goal of the ego, which would be to not focus on itself somehow. Why is it systemically preventing us from focusing on ourselves, from feeling curiosity towards ourselves? I think there's two ways. One is because the way in which money operates seems to create these feedback loops where pleasure becomes much more immediately available, right? Because of how money operates. If capitalism requires constant pushing of the boundaries in order to survive as a system, and as a system, it is going to survive, right? It's sort of internally designed to survive. So, in order to survive, because of the nature of money being used as a commodity, if the second money is used as a commodity, you need to compete in order to survive. So, right, how did this work exactly? It's this issue that things need to be purchased, but things need to be purchased at faster and faster rates, because it doesn't just self-stabilize. And again, it doesn't self-stabilize because of the nature of money. Because money is a commodity that only can only keep producing itself if more and more extraction of resources happens, because then that extraction of resources generates more money, or something like that. So in any case, what that means is that we do live in a world where it seems as if there is a slope upwards in how much pleasure is advertised. Because after all, it's pleasure that is going to get you out into the streets to buy stuff and spend money. And so it seems as if, right, that the ways in which ads are slowly more and more all pervasive, the way in which, discourse is constantly more and more celebrating pleasure, celebrating the following of pleasure. It needs to be that way in order to survive, because it needs to create a situation where everyone is 100% just seeking their pleasure more and more intensely every time. So that completely prevents you from focusing on yourself. And the problem then is that it's not just like a series of ideas that are like convincing you to follow pleasure. It's the entire material, like, social structure that you're living in. So you're being told this sort of injunction to enjoy, right? As Zizek says, is constant at every sort of level, and levels that are almost like mythological, bizarre to think of, like probably even just at an architectural level, at a design level. The colors, the color combination of the streets and the places in which we plant parks and stuff like that, and so that it ends up being this enormous sort of unconscious network of injunctions. And then connected to that injunction to enjoy is the opposite, the mirror image of this injunction, which is a prohibition, a prohibition to find any value in yourself, and therefore in other people. Because I think to find value in yourself, to feel curiosity in yourself, is a way of feeling curiosity for selfness itself. If you manage to feel curiosity for yourself, you also foster curiosity towards selves, any self that may present itself in front of you suddenly seems like something worthy of curiosity and of care and of love. So that only comes from feeling curiosity for yourself. Or, they both come together in a vice versa sort of way. So it really seems as if the shadow side of the injunction to enjoy is a certain worldview that tells you that human nature is a terrible thing, and that therefore there is no point in feeling curiosity or love towards yourself, right? And that it's either a terrible thing or it's something that doesn't even exist, right? I think that a lot of the ideas that suggest that we don't even exist, we're just sort of neurons firing, we don't really exist, so there's no point in focusing on yourself because you don't exist. You might as well just focus on whatever it is that the neurons are doing, which is feeling pleasure or whatever, right? So it's a conservative worldview in that sense, in that it says, well, the way in which the sort of dog-eat-dog situation in which the strong beats the weak, and the stronger desire beats the smaller desire, somehow that is the way things are, and the will of God, and that is a will that should be followed. So I think you're sort of injuncted to enjoy and to consider yourself simultaneously as like worthless and non-existent. So that's funny, because obviously that prevents any sort of urge to connect with fellow people and with the world. Because if the world is just a sort of dead, valueless thing, and you're told that dead, valueless things are things that you should not connect with, then why would you spend time connecting with that? And if you're told that you yourself are like that as well, then why would you spend time just simply being, not doing anything? And then on the other hand, there's the idea of, well, but you should enjoy constantly. And you should enjoy more and more. So a very high value is placed on pleasure, but it's a pleasure that's completely like depersonalized and sort of totalized. It's like a Platonic idea of pleasure. It has nothing to do with the particulars, the particular sort of pleasure of having a biscuit on a sunny day. It has nothing to do with that sunny day or that biscuit. It's just the pure pleasure, the sort of addictive pleasure of it that could be felt here as it could be felt on a rainy day or in a different country. It doesn't matter. What matters is just the abstracted form of pleasure, the highest form of pleasure that could be obtained. So that's why I like the only sort of way of resisting this that I can think of is like taking those two stances and say, okay, so there is a stance that's trying to make me feel as if I'm worthless and the world is worthless and it doesn't exist. This stance is like the only way I see of fighting against it really is, first of all, having the experience that this is not true. And this experience, I think, comes from love and from care and from curiosity in whatever way that it can come. You know? So any care, love, and curiosity that you feel helps bridge that gap. And as for the injectment to enjoy, I think it's sort of trying to figure that out, realize that that's what's happening, what you're being told, and really like just trying to go against it. Like I don't see any other option than like good old-fashioned religious abstaining in a way. That's what I don't see, right? I don't see any other option than that. People like William Blake, who, would say, follow your foolishness until you become wise. That's also a way. Right, precisely because we're talking about goalless practice, it doesn't really matter which goal it is. I would say the goal is to stop feeling pleasure. William Blake would say the goal is to really abandon yourself into pleasure. And somehow goalless practice sits in the middle of that. So to me, in the present moment, the issue is just to listen to myself, try to express what it is that I'm feeling, and share it in some way. And listen to what others are saying and try to feel curiosity towards the world. But really, again, I feel that there is a value in trying to go against the obligation to feel pleasure. Because it's so easy to feel like it's a completely personal choice, a personal thing, because your pleasure is so personal. It's so yours. Eating a cookie on a sunny day. It feels like it's just what you want. I want to eat this cookie. It's strange to disentangle that from a web that seems so disconnected from yourself. To say, oh, well, actually, it seems as if this desire that I'm feeling personally is systemically being reinforced, not just in me, but in absolutely everyone at every level, and has been for a long time, right? I think that to see that systemic aspect of things helps disconnect yourself a little bit from your own urges. Be like, okay, I do feel this urge, but I also realize that it's not 100% me, or there is something in me that's a little out of alignment with that, precisely because I'm a person. If I were the embodiment of the system, then yes, it would be my pleasure. But clearly I'm not the embodiment of the system, right? The totalitarian urge would be for each individual to feel like they are 100% an embodiment of the system. But due to the nature of limitations and things like that, no individual is the embodiment of the system, because each individual is different. And the system is not different. The system is rigidly the same. It's just this rigid abstraction. No individual is this rigid abstraction. So no matter what the situation is, your desires at some point, at some level, are going to differ from the desires that the system is reproducing. And your fears are going to differ from the fears that the system is reproducing. So again, the system may be reproducing this fear that you're worthless, life is worthless, life doesn't barely even exist, subjectivity doesn't barely even exist, this fear. And you, again, like with the cookie in the garden, you can feel this depression, this fear, and you'd be like, oh, this is my fear, my depression. I'm so depressed. It's my worldview. It's my fears. But they're not. They're not, because when you see that it's exactly the kind of fears that the system is reproducing, you realize, I can't be the system because I'm a person. And therefore, I'm slightly different from the system. So even if my fears are very close to those of the system, I can't let myself be fooled by the idea that I'm exactly like the system. But the system needs me to be fooled by that idea. So I think it's good to try and discover in which way are my fears slightly out of alignment with the systems. Maybe I have fears that the system is not afraid of. Maybe I'm slightly afraid of things that the system is actually defending. And maybe I'm defending things that the system seems to be afraid of at micro levels. And how do you become aware of that? By becoming aware of yourself, right? By focusing on yourself, by feeling curiosity towards yourself, by meditating, by whatever way it is. There needs to be some sort of curiosity towards the slight differences that there are between yourself and the system in which you're in. And without that, you can't interact with others. Without that, I think you just interact with others as pure sort of projection of archetypes. Because you live in this weird reenactment of system. So yeah.